So one of the questions I wanted to answer, Cosmic Goose asked, what is your current top 3 favorite movies and why? And earlier, Krim asked what our favorite genre was. And I think that this is a good example, a good
Horror.
way to like highlight our interests. My 3 favorite movies do not change very frequently. I have like an ongoing list, and I spreadsheet what movies I watch, and I give them all ratings, so I can answer this very, very easily. My favorite movie of all time is Under the Skin by Paul Glazer. That is, or Jonathan Glazer, I mean. That is a really great movie. Excellent horror film, excellent sci-fi film. My second favorite movie of all time is Alien by Ridley Scott. Really excellent movie, great sci-fi horror film. And my third favorite movie is Blade Runner 2049 by Denis Villeneuve, and that is a great sci-fi film. You can probably extrapolate my entire interests off of those 3 films. So there you go. Those are the 3 movies that are my favorite. For a while, it was number 3 was The Witch by Robert Eggers, but
The Vavitch, you mean?
Yes, The Vavitch.
Original joke.
Great movie, but it got edged out by 2049 when it came out. But film is my niche. I'm the film guy. I watch a lot of movies. I've seen too many of them. I like pretty much anything as long as it's good. Is sort of my
That's not. No, you can't say that.
Yes, I can.
It's easy. No one can stop you.
I'll watch and enjoy any genre of anything as long as the thing is good. I've seen like, many movies.
For one, the definition of good is the thing that you're saying. Like, what's your favorite movie is the one that you think is good. But
yeah, I
that's
don't
one
like
thing.
Bad things, Colonel. This is simple.
But also, you can enjoy things that are bad. You can I don't know. Yeah. And some people do.
I do. But yeah. I also will. It's like a square.
It's not your favorite.
A rectangle is a square, but a square is not a rectangle. Like
yeah.
I will like bad movies, but I also guarantee you, if a movie is good, I will like it as well. So
it's actually the other way around. The square is a rectangle, but either way, I understand what you mean.
Oh.
I have a list. I made my list. I
found my old Letterboxd account.
Sheepish Justice says high five for Aliens. No, I don't like Aliens.
Excuse me.
I like Alien.
Those are very different movies.
Alien is my favorite.
The suit looks way funnier in the first movie.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's comfort food. I actually enjoy horror quite a lot because it's very rare that I see a horror movie that I have a bad time with. Like, it has happened, but it's usually like there was this one Wendigo movie. What was it called? I forget the name. It was just really bad. Oh no, it wasn't Wendigo. It was maybe it was. It was just a group of like teenagers went into a cave or fell into a ravine, and there was like old people there. No, The Descent is incredible, but no,
the first Descent is incredible. I was about to be very sus.
Yeah, but it is similar to The Descent. It is similar to The Descent. But yeah, I like horror. But my second and third favorite are not horrors. My second is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That counts as one movie. Yeah, because of course. And
movie.
I watched them all in a row.
It's not even one book.
It was all. No, that's not true. Lord of the Rings was written as one large book, and it was only split up for publishing reasons.
Oh yeah, it's true. And my third one is Wall-E. But I don't watch a lot of movies. But yeah.
I found my old Letterboxd account, which is horrifying.
I know Keith's favorite movie, but I don't know his number 2 or his number 3.
What I'm particularly fixated on is that I have in my sidebar of my Letterboxd account, I wrote actors that make me want to watch a movie and actors that make me want to skip a movie. And there are some that I stand by and some that I would not keep here anymore. And you can really tell when I wrote this. So I thought that this might be funny. Actors that make me want to skip a movie: Adam Sandler, David Spade, Aziz Ansari, Nick Swartzen, Kevin James, Jamie Kennedy, Gerard Butler, Ashton Kutcher. So far, so good, honestly.
Yeah.
Falls off a cliff here for obvious reasons. Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, who are both great.
Oh.
But in 2014, really I may have not liked them for some reason.
Oh, I wonder what it could have been.
This list is much worse though. Actors that make me want to watch a movie: Leonardo DiCaprio, Natalie Portman, Robert Downey Jr., Edward Norton, Ryan Gosling, Bruce Willis, Emma Stone, and Matthew McConaughey.
Bruce Willis is pretty rough to have on that list.
He's not. He hasn't been good for so long.
I will say DiCaprio, as much of person aside, I suppose. There's few movies that I've watched of him. I don't like seek them out specifically, but when he's in a movie, I usually enjoy the movie. My favorite of his is Shutter Island, which was sort of, it wasn't amazing or anything, but I did enjoy the movie.
I just love that from the Ryan Gosling inclusion, you can tell that when I stopped updating this account, that Drive was recent. Mm-hmm. And Drive was a good movie.
Drive's really good.
I do like Ryan Gosling still, and Ed Norton and Robert Downey Jr. A lot of the rest of this list is pretty questionable. Oh, I like Emma Stone a lot, actually.
She's great.
I enjoy Emma Stone in movies. But no, what is much more consistent incredible. Is that my favorite films I basically still stand by, but only in the way that I'm like, favorite movies of all time. Like every time anyone asks me what my favorite of anything is, I'm always like, whatever. There's like I have like placeholder answers for video games and for comics and for films. And the answer is always like, there's either some kind of incredibly impactful thing that I can't emotionally separate from anymore, like Ad Astra for obvious reasons. Or it's just like, yeah, these are really good, and I liked them a long time ago, and I still like them, and at some point it just gets wrapped up in nostalgia and other things that aren't like you can't like reason with, so it doesn't really matter why they're my favorite anymore. And that is the top three is Dark Crystal, Reservoir Dogs, and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
The original or the remake?
The original.
I guess the remake's Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, that's called Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. I watched it once in theaters and was like, no.
Jimmy, friend of the podcast, asks, what are our favorite horror games? This is gonna be easy for me. Pathologic 2, The Void. There you go. It's all three of them.
Is The Void also a horror game?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know anything about The Void besides
horror ice pick.
I don't know
game.
The Void either.
All I've been warned about with The Void is that it can make it unwinnable or something, I think, and it has a lot of nudity.
You can very, very easily just fuck yourself in that game completely and have to start over.
The Pathologic
I've also
games
played
are very
Tension,
good.
which is the other version of The Void, which is different and was only in Russian and Polish for a while, but then they translated it through a fan patch. So I've played both versions, and both versions are very good.
Horror games are neat. The ones where you actually have to do a survival horror are the best ones. So like Pathologic is neat, and the Resident Evil 2 remake is fun. The ones that are just action games in disguise are a harder sell. So most of the Silent Hill franchise is like, they're just kind of run and gun games that are masquerading as being disempowering, but actually you're really powerful, and that's kind of rough. But then then people are like, play hard mode, and then but everyone actually agrees that hard mode is like unplayably miserable and not in interesting ways. So I always wish that the franchise played differently than it does.
I like Silent Hill 2, and I've played all of them, but I like Silent Hill 2 a lot.
You've played all
Isolation.
Of Silent Hills?
Alien Isolation was really neat, but it's 3 times as long as it should be probably.
You guys, I'm debating which one to put up on my first, and Alien Isolation was tied with Darkwood, and I was just making the decision to
Darkwood's fun.
The Alien Isolation in first when you said it's too long.
Darkwood is really good if you don't get distracted by the fact that it's badly made. It's really well made. It's really well made. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
Its game design choices like definitely don't hold up to scrutiny. Like I was actually talking.
You have to actively ignore the fact that death doesn't matter for starters, but also like the way you proceed through the story is completely unrelated to what feels like the core gameplay loop of surviving nights and scavenging during day, and like that whole loop. Those two things are unconnected. So a speedrun is just watching somebody run to all the story cutscenes really fast and leaving the game. They don't even engage with the base building because it's just not relevant to the gameplay.
Yeah, I didn't have that experience and purposely didn't, but I enjoyed it a lot. I'm gonna say that Pathologic is not a horror game for me. And so I will excuse it not being in my top 3, because it would be in my top 3, probably in first as well. But my third one is Resident Evil, the original one. The remake of the original one.
Remake is really, really high up there for me as well. Yeah. I think that's basically a perfect video game.
I haven't played the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, mostly because they're expensive and I didn't. Yeah.
But next time they go on sale, I'll gift them to you on
Resident Evil 2 remake is really solid.
I can buy them. It's just that, you know, there's a certain amount of value that I put to things.
Resident Evil 2 remake got really good at making me just have moments where I just have to pause the game and just give myself a moment to breathe, because it's getting so bad. Like, so much is happening that is not. It's just getting out of my control, and I have to just pause the game and think about it for a moment.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's what made me fall in love with Resident Evil 1. Was precisely that sort of feeling of being like, it's not necessarily that you have to pause the game, although pausing the game works totally fine as well. But it's just like going into another room where you know it's safe, and then thinking, okay, how am I going to get out of this mess? And that methodical sort of, you know, what's going to be there more or less, and how many resources you're going to get. That's why I prefer Resident Evil to Silent Hill. I only played Silent Hill 1 and 2 though. And I don't know that I finished the good ending with Silent Hill 2.
I don't think there is just a solid good ending in Silent Hill 2. They're all just kind of different shades of weird.
Mm-hmm.
Krim asks, what about Scorn? Scorn looks cool, but I don't think is a very good game.
No.
But it looks cool.
Scorn kind of sucks.
I didn't like Scorn at all.
It has horrible pacing. Like Scorn is very obviously feels like it's built in chronological order, and so each level of the game feels like it's from a different era of a very long development cycle with a different design philosophy. But almost none of the parts of the game were good puzzles. There's parts of the game that are really cool visually and kind of cool reveals of what's going on, but the majority of the gameplay is trying to solve the puzzles, and the puzzles are just wildly inconsistent. Like there's a one where you you go to like a station to like essentially give yourself like a status effect essentially, and then you're supposed to try to run to this one, like, and like the core of this whole part of the game is just to give yourself this effect and run over here to like essentially spend the effect. But narratively, there's a really obvious place to try to take it immediately, and if you go that way, the effect just goes away, which gives you with no other feedback available, gives you the impression that the effect is like timing or distance based, and that's how little time or distance you have. But if you go the other way, it stays on you for way longer, because that's the way you're supposed to go to get to the objective. You actually were just passing a logic gate that kills it prematurely, but that poisons the data for how the effect works in the first place and makes the puzzle obtuse and confusing, just because they wouldn't make a certain hallway longer to offset that obvious gap in the design. But like that's near the end of the game where they have super low budget puzzles that cover very little distance. The beginning of the game is essentially one puzzle that's just about trying to open a door, and that part is a massive, sprawling, multi-room, multi-floor, lore-heavy nightmare that feels like certain levels of Uru. It has multiple solutions. It's an incredibly, like, shockingly convoluted for what it is. And
I think it's probably the best part of the game as well.
That part's more impressive. It has some very bad communication at parts of like being able to parse what the hell you're looking at.
They don't have any text in the game. They don't have
any labels. I mean, like the feedback you get visually for doing certain things is so obtuse sometimes that you can't tell what you're accomplishing or if you are. That crossed with the fact that it's like you have a 2-mile walk between everything you want to even fiddle with to test that because in these like Myst kind of situations, because that part of the game has the most in common with Myst, you're walking into some kind of abandoned civilization, and the puzzle solution requires you to essentially recreate what people used to do there, essentially, which is also how firmament and abduction works. Like that's just the Myst formula, is to be dropped into some kind of civilization, and you have to understand how the devices work for the purposes that they use them, basically, in order to solve the puzzle, as opposed to just kind of like Monkey Island, like, well, let's try to melt a lock. And so like it's that kind of style thing, but it's so big and you're so slow that it legitimately takes hours just to jiggle the handles long enough to even start making progress to parse what you're looking at. Like, it's just so big. It's a real rough take on that, and the art doesn't make up for it necessarily. But it does have a dick sucky torture device, and that's hilarious.
It is.
I didn't find it very funny. I thought I didn't play the game. I only watched your Let's Play, but I think the level design.
You didn't see it uncensored, so you don't know why it's funny.
I looked it up.
Uncensored, you're like, oh.
I know why. I looked it. I saw. I know.
It's just
when
startling.
I played that moment, it happened, and I was like, "Is that what I think it is?" I guess it
should have been there the entire game. I don't know why it wasn't there the entire game.
Yeah, why wasn't your protagonist just rock hard for the entire playthrough?
100%.
Every time you look down.
I mean,
With our H.R. Giger fan fiction just hits its final form by just going straight back to the id.
But what I felt very much in that game, and you mentioned you mentioned it already when you said your piece, but the translation between concept art and level design is very old school in that game.
So old school,
and I don't like that too much. I think it's all right for certain types of concept art, like for example level reveals or lore exposition stuff, but so much of the potential of that sort of art style is just in the way you traverse levels and just sort of creating that sort of ambiance where you're moving around and using puzzles. But that game just has veiny tunnels, and that's it. It's just so repetitive when you're actually moving around. If you don't stop to appreciate the set pieces,
it's so maximalist that almost none of it's impactful.
Yeah.
Agree.
There's also multiple moments where you like lose perspective and then awaken somewhere else, and I just couldn't tell if I was supposed to think I was the same person still or not.
Yeah, I agree with you. Apparently, some people think, "Oh, it's very obviously not the same person." I'm like, no. Have you never seen a movie? Do you not know cinematography or cinematic language, I should say?
Yeah, completely. Interesting. I agree with everything that was said about that. Let's quick fire some answers. Someone asked, have we played Soma? I think we've all played Soma.
Yes.
Keith, did you do an LP of Soma?
Yeah. Soma's in my brain all the time.
Yeah,
Soma's amazing.
Good.
Soma,
great game.
I have to revisit it every time I talk about the transporter problem. I'm like, fucking,
I actually forgot about.
Look at it.
Yep.
Someone's the tutorial for why this is a horrific concept.
Yes.
I forgot about Soma in my top 3 list. It's also there.
It is high up there. Soma is probably the only game in the history of video games that has actually deeply unsettled me, like philosophically speaking.
It didn't unsettle me, but I liked the subjects that it talks about. I liked that the protagonist is dumb, and like canonically not just has the wrong ideas. He's just not very smart. And I like that it might shape people's understanding of the setting. I thought it was very interesting that they made the protagonist not get the setting in a realistic way as well.
Didn't understand what was happening. Yeah. Celium says, how did you guys build tolerance for horror? I love horror and concept, but I can't for the life of me handle jump scares and feeling scared, and it always makes me feel really bad afterwards. This is a weird question because we've kind of talked about it before, but like most of the horror that I consume doesn't have jump scares. Like jump scares are cheap, bad, dumb horror that like isn't worth spending time on.
I think I instinctively dodge movies that have jump scares because I can't remember the last time I saw a single one. And I think it's because they're only in like really schlocky, like mass marketed, like haunting movies with this scary woman.
Like I'm not playing
woman
Five
in the
Nights
shower.
at
What's she gonna do?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not playing Five Nights at Freddy's. Like that stuff doesn't even scare me. It's just startling. It's like that's whatever. But in terms of like, oh no, like horror, like I'm in a scary situation. Like I don't know how to explain it. Like I'm playing a video game. Like I'm watching a movie. Like I'm not scared of the demons because they're not real. Like I'm gonna look away from the TV and they're not gonna hurt me. It's whatever.
I'm just like what
that's
has
just how
jump scares in
people
it?
Stuff.
Have you never actually felt when you were younger? Have you never felt scared and not interested in the horror movies?
Uh,
'Cause-
no, not really.
Oh.
I think there have definitely been moments like my this is not a joke. My strongest fear association that I have with a video game came when I was probably, I want to say, 9 or 10 years old. I was playing Symphony of the Night on my PS1, and I was home alone on the second floor of my house. I've mentioned this before, but I grew up in a split level house. I lived with my grandparents downstairs, and then basically there was like another house built on top of my house. And that was the house that my mother, my stepfather, and my younger brother lived in. So our houses were separated, but they were like the same building. And so I went upstairs to play Symphony of the Night because I was like supposed to watch over my younger brother because no one else was home after school one day. And I was just like sitting alone in a room playing Symphony of the Night. And I got to the underground caverns, and there's like a kind of spooky song that plays, and nothing in the game is scary. Symphony of the Night is not a scary game. It's just a 2D Metroidvania. It's like horror flavored because it has like Dracula in it, but it's not scary. But I just remember being really profoundly just made nervous by the fact that like the house was really still and there was no noise outside and nothing was really going on. And that's probably my strongest fear reaction to a video game ever, was like I just happened to be playing a game while I felt really anxious. But in terms of like outside of like being startled, like turning a corner in a game and there's like an enemy there that I didn't expect, me being like, oh, like that's about the limit of how I get, how scared I get in a video game. I just never get scared of things, not in movies either. Movies and books and media in general.
I feel like when you're younger, you just have more weird fear responses to stuff. Like that's harder to explain now. I used to think that like Myst style, like static screens that would sometimes have one thing move when you interacted with it, and like first person clicking games were like terrifying when I was like 5.
Just like unsettlingly empty. Definitely have had that feeling. But like, I guess my thing is like, I grew up in a creative family. Like I have family members who have like made famous comic books and worked on movies and stuff. So my whole perspective of like fiction is wrapped around the idea of it being created by a human being with the purpose of like communicating stuff to people. And I get really into the craft side of it. So when I am watching a horror movie, even when I was a kid, I watched The Ring, and like my first question was like, oh my God, how did they shoot like the girl walking out of the TV? Like, how do you do that? That's so cool. Like I see it and I'm like, ooh, it's creepy. Like I understand that it's creepy, but I'm wrapped up in the idea of like, this is a cool shot. What does this mean? This was a really cool art film that they made. Like, that's creepy. Who came up with this? How did they do this? It's just like, it's just cool. Like, it's like, that's my fear response. So to answer, like, how do you build tolerance for horror? It's not real. It's okay. It's all right. Take a deep breath.
I still have fear responses to media. Like I was genuinely terrified of like of Annihilation. And fuck, I lost the example I was trying to talk about while I was waiting.
You mentioned Hereditary before. Annihilation and Hereditary are two good examples of the sort of horror that sort of you don't need to look at to engage with, which is fun. I like the movies that you need to like you after the fact or even during, like you stop midway through and like think on it and like engage with that feeling or with a it could be even the visuals, but I really like jump scares are one thing.
Sincerely got me. I hid for a long time just hearing things from one of the first monsters and not wanting to go back out to deal with trying to navigate the level.
It's funny, the monsters in Soma never did it for me. The things in Soma that did it for me were like
I agree.
Hours after I finished the game, I was just like, copy and paste. Huh?
Yeah.
It's like that's like the
concept
most
stuck with me long term, but it was just the fact that like oftentimes before, it's like the Jaws thing, like before you properly experience something, that's often when you're most like unnerved by it. So like I had not died yet or anything or been attacked directly yet. I was just having the initial reveals or sounds of the monsters in Soma. Like there was a whole part where I just was just hiding in a side room hoping the sounds would just go away so I could continue forward because I was just so unnerved by continuing. But like in a similar level, like or like how like book of House of Leaves gets more horrific as it goes on technically, but
Yeah.
it was just Johnny Truant's explanation of his like sort of anxiety attack manifestation things while he started reading the other guy's book that had the most direct effect on me, and like was sort of like causing night terrors and stuff like that, more so than the rest of the entire book was. Like that vagueness early on was more impactful than any of the actual things that happened in the other 90% of the book.
Yeah.
I think in games, if you're not if you're too scared, or if you don't enjoy the process of being scared from a gameplay sense, like for example in Soma, like having monsters that you can't fight easily or you don't understand the rules. If you don't enjoy that process, maybe horror games are not necessarily the right kind of horror media that for you. Because I personally, I like the tension. Alien Isolation for me is incredible because the rules are sort of obvious, but the execution is
Yeah.
is
Getting
scary.
that perfect run, like learning how to thread that needle. I definitely I want to
Soma isn't like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I want to stress about things like Alien Isolation. Like I don't find those games scary, but I do get the adrenaline
Well, they're
rush
horror
of
games.
but I don't think necessarily like horror is so subjective. Being scared is a very subjective emotional response. I think you can be horror without being scary. Like, because what is scary to one person is not scary to another.
Yeah.
So
I kind of got
especially
numb
gameplay
to the
games.
idea of the alien being scary in Alien Isolation,
Yes.
but instead it was like a 20-hour stress episode because I was playing on hard,
Yes.
and like anything makes you lose immediately so much, and it's such
so good. I love
it's so ambiguous even being able to sense which actions will at what intensities cause you to be fucked. So you just you're just on your tiptoes for the entire thing, and the game is so fucking long, and it just gets, that game was physically exhausting to get through.
It is.
Yeah.
And you did it in
definitely, my
VR.
belly hurts. My belly
I
hurts like after a couple of hours playing the game every time.
Yeah.
Because it's just
when I went through
Alien,
Alien specifically, I played it in VR on nightmare mode with a mod that untethered the alien and unlocked its full AI tree from the start. So I was playing basically a fucking simulation game, playing Alien Isolation. And I like, you know, after a certain while you start, because you respawn and you yada yada, you start viewing the game, as Colonel was saying, in this idea of like rules. And the horror for me stops being like, oh no, the ooga booga monster is going to jump out and get me. And instead is like, okay, I have approximately 45 seconds to make it from the second floor down to the first floor so I can get to the save station, so I can begin opening the door. And then the second that I open the door, two androids and the xenomorph are going to start moving towards me. From there, I have 15 seconds to grab this, this, and this. And I need to make sure I have these items so I can craft a noise thing to throw it. And like, that's where that's the tension that I crave. Like, I love that feeling.
Toaster is a masochist, duly noted. Toaster kills every enemy on his way back to the boss every time he dies in any Souls-like.
It's true.
But this is how he's wired.
I like to be good at, I like to understand what I'm being asked for before I go to the test. That's how I view things, is you do the homework and then you pass the test.
But like, I just want to say that though, if you're having trouble with horror games and their mechanics, what I did the first time I was scared of a game, it wasn't a horror game, obviously, because it's like Myst. It was Tomb Raider. The original Tomb Raider has some soundtrack sort of chimes and stings. And the first time I found wolves in that game, the soundtrack kicks in and it's like, ooh. And that's not how the soundtrack goes. The soundtrack goes, I forget exactly how it is, but yeah. So the first time I saw the wolves jump at me and I heard the soundtrack, I'm like, I'm disabling the soundtrack is what I'm doing. Yeah. And so the first time I played Tomb Raider at the age of 12 or whatever, was without a soundtrack, and I wasn't as scared. It was still a tense game a lot of the time because there's difficult enemies and I wasn't good. But yeah, controlling the variables might be a
Your sneaky solution was like, what if horror didn't have audio?
It's not as horrific. It's not as tense.
I tricked them.
Yeah. It's like in a horror movie.
Pausing off is like a hack. It's like a very good hack to like cheat out a lot of like dumb, tricky suspense. Because like you're onto something there. Like a lot of movies, it's the laugh track problem is what we refer to it as, or the laugh track cue. Where like in sitcoms, a lot of their jokes aren't very funny, but you laugh because you hear the laugh track. So it like makes your sympathetic neurons fire, and then you laugh because you think you're supposed to. This is the same thing with horror movies where like something pops out of a closet. If you were to silence the audio there, it's not very scary. But because when it happens, the volume goes like to scare you, you immediately have a response to it. So turning off the soundtrack or the sound effects will like give you armor against the like kind of dumb horror cues that happen in a lot of horror movies and in horror games.
And being conscious as well of the role of the soundtrack in movies also allows you to enjoy them a little bit better at your pacing rather than necessarily
definitely
more passively. Like one thing I see a lot, I think it's a more modern sort of trend, but it is definitely a thing that I observe, is that whenever the game wants you, or the movie, but movies do that, when they want you to be emotional, they like increase the volume by like 5 decibels, which is a lot.
Yes.
And like what I actively do is I lower the volume when the movie is trying to make me emotional. No, very quiet. I have subtitles. I'm good. Let's see. Make me emotional with your lines instead of your volume, because it grinds my gears. Just like all the soundtrack going at full strength, and I'm like, shut up! That's not gonna make me cry. It makes my ears bleed. Is what it is.
One of the
unless
ways
it's Lord of the Rings, in which case it's maximum volume all the time.
There's a way to trick this.
Crank it.
If you have like a surround sound system or a sound bar, a trick that you can do to make this better is to turn your left and right and back channels down about 3 or 4 decibels and boost your center channel, because usually audio is separated onto the center channel, so that it's more audible no matter where you are. And it will boost the dialogue while reducing the sound, like the soundtrack and the sound cues. It doesn't work for every movie and game, but it is a very good trick. It's something that we do in the industry when we're trying to sound mix things as well.
Good point. That's a great idea. I don't have a sound setup. I have speaker headsets. I used to have a 5.1 setup, but
it can be so much harder to hear stuff the moment you're not wearing headphones.
Yep.
Just trying to I'm like, why do I need to turn subtitles on for everything? Because I can't understand the dialogue. Why are things like this? Do you want to talk about Amnesia, Toaster, to close this out since we're over 2 hours in?
Oh, sure. I mentioned it sort of in chat. Jimmy asked any thoughts on the new Amnesia. This is going to be real quick because my thoughts are pretty simple on it. But I played it and it was pretty good. I like that it is sort of like an old school Resident Evil game. You have a very specific set of instructions. You are in a hub-based room, and you have to go out into the different spokes of this mine to collect items that you need and then ferry them back to your room, which has a storage box. I do think there's some kind of sloppy game design in there a little bit. A really good example of this is there is a storage box. It has a set amount of inventory slots. However, when you drop things in the world in this game, they don't disappear. So you can just bring everything back to your base and just drop stuff in front of the storage box and never be out of inventory slots. Because
you can have your System Shock elevator.
Exactly. I have my System Shock medical room. But yeah, it's a good game. Like outside of a few of those like kind of amateur quote unquote like game design imbalances, it's a real solid game. It's very understated. The way that it does its puzzles is kind of cool. I like that kind of cleverly the game allows you to it generates all of the codes that you find in the game at the creation of your save file. So the way that I ended up playing was like I would be in my base, and so I would like go out and explore all these areas and find a bunch of clues, and eventually die as I acclimate to what the area is supposed to ask of me. Like I find my objective. Okay, I have to go into this room to turn on a generator or something. And then I would respawn, use the codes I found before I died to open the lockers to get the rewards I would have ostensibly gotten if I had come back alive. But interestingly enough, a lot of these rewards are very specifically items that make getting through the area you find the code in more simple. Like they're very much like,
that's
you can now use this item to make going back through this area easier. So what ended up being this process of like, okay, I go there for an exploratory run, die, grab the items, and now I'm equipped to do the challenge that it asked of me. And I found it very relaxing. So yeah, I beat the new Amnesia game in about 9 hours, I think was my playthrough time. Obviously inflated because I was streaming it, but we played on the hardest difficulty. But about 9 hours, I got what I think is like the best ending, completely by coincidence, which is kind of cool. And yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. I am very interested to see what the new studio or whatever the new team that worked on it does in the future. It was pretty good. If you like Resident Evil,
it's a new team.
Yeah, it's like a new internal team at Frictional, just like Rebirth was.
Yeah, I still haven't played Rebirth. I need to.
I haven't either. Yeah. But yeah, I'm interested. I think that it's a cool game.
I've still never personally played a single Amnesia game.
Oh, well, maybe we can do that sometime. But yeah, it's the video game equivalent. It's like if you took a storage box run from a Resident Evil game, like literally like, okay, I need to figure out how like plan my route and get my 96 handgun rounds to the storage box before I move forward. It's that feeling spread out into an entire video game. So it's pretty cool. I liked it. It was all right. That's your recommendation for the week. Go play Amnesia the Bunker.
Or else.
I do recommend The Dark Descent. I played it. It was my first Amnesia. Then I played the Penumbra games, which I did not enjoy as much. But they were fine.
It essentially caused me doing Let's Plays in a way, just because I was friends with Andrew on Steam, and he left a review of The Dark Descent about how he said, play Amnesia, get insomnia. And it just sounded funny how scared he was of that game. So I was like, we should record that for videos. I've never heard of a Let's Play. And which is not the most original thing, because a lot of people have that exact idea about Amnesia specifically. But we didn't actually record Amnesia specifically because he'd already played it. So we went back and recorded Penumbra, the Black Plague, as like one of our first things.
That's the second one.
And or I think it was the Black Plague. The one that has it's just straight up has scenes from The Thing in it. Like it just has the kennel and stuff. You're like, hang on a minute. But I only ever personally played Soma. Requiem. And that's about it. But anyway, that's probably going to be it for today, this week, podcast. See you guys next time. Send your questions to dialoguechoicespodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.